Happy hunting, everybody! You've come across one of our Precon review videos from our series of Duskmourn Precon reviews. If you want to watch the entire video, unedited, all 4 of the Precon reviews together, you can click somewhere over here on the screen. There will be a link to go to that one. If not, sit back, enjoy the show. You're about to watch one of the Precon reviews.
Are you prepared for some endless punishment?
I am.
Welcome to the maws of hell. It's the endless punishment deck. We're here for a good time, not a fast time. Actually, that's not true. We're here for a very fast time in Group Slug. We're here for a, did you just enjoy Bumbleflower being able to give gifts? Nah, Hellspawn, baby. Let's go.
You're just pistol whipping the table.
Yeah. So, Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls, is our leader here of the Endless Punishment Rakdos colored deck. We are going to be basically punishing our opponents. Group Slug is kind of the name here, what we're going with here. The idea is that we're just going to be doing effects that just endlessly ping and drain our opponents for playing the game. Are you having fun? Now you're not. So Valgavoth is 2 black and a red. Funny enough, did you actually notice, by the way, all 4 face commanders cost 4?
Oh, neat.
Yeah. They cool. for some reason made all the commanders of this cycle, all of them cost the same. So it's going to be very interesting to see if that is an effect on how powerful these play against each other, because all 4 are coming down at roughly the same time.
Yes.
Very interestingly. I just thought that was a nice little fun fact. Valgavoth is 4 black and a red for a legendary Elder Demon. It's a 4/4. Flying, ward, pay 2 life, and whenever an opponent loses life for the first time during each of their turns, put a +1/+1 counter on Valgavoth and draw a card. What you're going to want to be doing with this is setting up your game effects and pieces down in play that say if your opponent does some kind of action during their turn that causes them to lose life or take damage in any capacity, Valgavoth will get himself bigger and draw you a card. So with the right pieces down, which this deck has a plethora of, you could go a turn cycle of Valgavoth getting a 1/1 counter and drawing you a card. So he could be like again 3 points higher by the time it goes back to you. And that's real sick. Just having things down that say like each person's upkeep, they take a damage, that draws you a card and gets your commander bigger. Like, this thing can get out of hand very quickly. Now, obviously, it only triggers the first time they lose life, and it's only during their during the opponent's turn. So you can't be doing the like, what's that? Ob Nixilis Captive Kingpin thing, where like you can't
say this feels kind of similar to it, but it's
like
once per, they've fixed Ob Nixilis.
Yeah, fixed Nixilis. There we go.
Ob Fixtilis.
Ha ha ha, got there. So that is the face commander, Valgavoth. Your alternate commander of this deck is the Lord of Pain. Whoops, if I am going out of the wrong tab here. There we go. The Lord of Pain. 3 black and a red, legendary human assassin, is a 5/5 with menace. Your opponents can't gain life, and when a player casts their first spell each turn, choose another target player. The Lord of Pain deals damage equal to that spell's mana value to the chosen player. So, you know, like we had that talk about the that one Cellar Spawn demon that came in the Miracles deck.
Yeah.
The Lord of Pain is kind of like that, but on repeat. Anytime during any person, like it's just whoever's turn it is, if somebody is able to pull off a spell of any kind, if the Lord of Pain is down, you get to choose another player to send damage of that mana value to wherever person you want to. And
it's
it triggers
very cool that you have to throw it at a different player than whoever cast the spell, because I was immediately when I read this, I was like, oh, they're just going to cast like a Soul Ring first and just take a damage or whatever and then start casting more spells. But no, they want to cast the big thing first so that you can throw all that damage at somebody else. You're going to end up being like an ally while you're group slugging.
Exactly. And then obviously worst case scenario as well, this does trigger off of you as well. So when you cast your first spell, you get to send damage outwards, but then as your opponents are also casting things, you then get to choose where the damage goes. I foresee this kind of card basically always be pointing damage at whoever is sitting at the highest life. And that is very cool then as well, that he also just naturally comes with your opponents can't gain life. You can gain life. You still have the capability to do that, which actually this deck wants you to do. There are multiple equipment in here that give an equipped creature lifelink. So if you throw those kind of things on the Lord of Pain, you're now flinging around damage in a kind of sense of like Exquisite Blood, kind of, where someone is losing damage and then you're gaining that life back because the Lord of Pain has lifelink.
I dig it.
Very, very cool. The deck, obviously, as you would expect, is filled with all kinds of Rakdos-y kind of card effects that basically punish anytime anybody would do anything, more or less. Some of the new cards that are in here are definitely going to be the ones that help you deal damage to people during their turns, and then just in general going to be controlling down the board so that obviously as you're flinging around all this damage, you're not just dying on the crackback. So what this deck is trying to do is drain everybody down for casting spells, and then you're following that up with game pieces and effects that keep the board clear or keep you alive as you are doing all this damage. That's obviously what Valgavoth is trying to do. Valgavoth will be getting himself bigger to help you close out a game faster and keeps your hand filled so that you always have answers as some of these hate pieces are getting thrown around. Group Slug is a very, very tricky subject to bring up about, because at some point someone's going to start claiming you as stacks. If you have too many, you take a damage for drawing a card, you take a damage for drawing a card, you take a damage for playing a land, those kind of things get frowned upon very quickly if they're if they go too long.
As an O'Hare Axonil player, I willingly admit that it is a mono red stacks deck. But it is. Group Slug is effectively stacks.
Yeah.
But it's stacks that ends the game. That's the important part. It's stacks that does damage.
Right. So what you want to be doing with this is you want to get these things down as quickly as you can so that you're just not sitting there with all of these pain pieces to potentially build up to a point where your opponents can retaliate. Stuff like the way we can be talking about here is Gleeful Arsonist. It's kind of like, what am I thinking here? It's kind of like reverse Guttersnipe, sort of, okay. But 2 and a red for a human wizard. It's a 1/2. Whenever an opponent casts a non-creature spell, Gleeful Arsonist deals damage equal to its power to that player, and then it has Undying. So if it were to die and has no counters, it comes back with a +1/+1 counter to the battlefield.
Oh, I missed this in spoiler season.
Yeah, well, I mean, this just got revealed behind the scenes notes a little bit here. We're recording this. Yeah, a couple hours ago. So yeah. We're really janking it up today. But sick. Yeah, so it's like it comes down initially, and obviously it's not quite the strength of Guttersnipe. It's one of those kind of ones that just deals 1 damage at a time. But if you can kill this thing and have it come back, now anytime your opponents are doing a non-creature spell, they're taking everybody is taking damage, or at least just that player is anyway. They're taking damage equal to its power, and obviously this can be affected by if you can have Gleeful Arsonist power get bigger as well. But I like it. Yeah, it's either those kind of like you had that really fun deck that it's like you do the villainous choice kind of thing, right? You're forcing, this whole deck is trying to force opponents into unfavorable situations. It's like, do you want to take damage for the cards you want to play, or are you just not going to play spells?
Right.
Both of those are good for you. That's the whole idea what this deck is trying to do. There's a really cool removal spell I wanted to bring up here called
Sadistic Shell Game. Oh,
we're getting to the shell game later. Suspended Sentence first, though. It's another one of these. It's a suspend card that keeps suspending itself. So for 3 and a black, it's an instant. You can destroy a creature an opponent controls. They lose 3 life, and then it gets exiled with 3 time counters on it, or you can suspend it for 1 and a black. And this is just gonna, you hide this away into suspend early, and then just basically every 3 turns, this just comes back off of exile, casts, and then goes back to exile.
Yes. I love that it makes the player whose creature the owner of the creature that you're killing is going to take the 3 from it, and I love that. So it's like Exterminate from the Doctor Who set. But yeah, it's dope that they're finishing this cycle of like rousing refrain inspiring refrain, rousing, maybe rousing refrain as well is the blue and the red ones. And then suspended sentence is now the black one. I wish that they would have kept with the moniker, like the name. But it is dope having another suspend card like this.
Yeah, I like this one a lot. And then you briefly brought it up, but yeah, I do want to talk about Sadistic Shell Game.
I love it.
This looks so good. I know, as our local purveyor of let's play a mini game. Honestly, not even necessarily a mini game. Let me read the card and then I'll go on my thoughts about it. 4 and a black for a sorcery, starting with the next opponent in turn order. Each player chooses a creature you don't control and destroy the chosen creatures. I read this kind of like Black Council's Judgment.
It is. It's almost exactly Black Council's Judgment because it doesn't target. It doesn't target. Shroud, hexproof, ward, whatever, and you're not going to have to pay for any of those things.
Yeah, the fact that nothing of yours can be chosen either. Now, granted, obviously, Council's Judgment can hit any non-land permanent, so Black obviously has to have its downside to it as well, but yeah, this is sick. The fact that it also starts with your opponent, like, you don't get to make your notions known until the table has made their choices.
Totally.
You know what I mean?
Like that thing.
Yeah. So, like, one of the downsides of Council's Judgment is that because when you start, your intentions are known right out the gate, so everybody else could potentially work around you. One of the problems with Council's Judgment is if your 3 opponents gang up on one permanent instead, your choice could sometimes become irrelevant. Because it starts with the opponents, they're going to be figuring out amongst themselves what thing they want to target, and then it gets to you, and you can either pile on the same thing that they've picked or pick something else entirely.
It's so dope, dude. One of these days, I'm just going to build like a Grixis minigames deck that just has like Wheel of Misfortune, Sadistic Shell Game, Liar's Pendulum, and just like my turn is purely, guys, we're going to stop playing Commander for a second and play a completely separate game.
A completely different mini game. Yep, yeah, exactly.
I'm so into Sadistic Shell Game. Also, like, it's 4 and a black. I would have expected this to be like 3 black. I'm really glad that they made this mana cost as inclusive as it is.
Yep, makes it splashable into a variety of different decks. I thought going in here, talking to begin with other reprint cards here, aside from Valgavoth and the Lord of Pain, there are 6 other legendary creatures in here that can be your commander. 6 other Rakdos-colored legends, including Rakdos himself, Vile Smasher the Fierce,
dude,
and Karavek the Merciless, and Mogus God of Slaughter.
Dope.
Like, absolutely, these reprint cards drive home the idea that this wants to be intense group slug. You've got like Mogus, who isn't a creature until you have your devotion up, and then even when he is, he's indestructible. And then at each opponent's upkeep, they take 2 damage unless they sacrifice a creature. That's ridiculous. Vile Smasher is one of those top end commanders of all time, I would argue.
Oh yeah.
Your first spell, random damage to an opponent equal to the mana value, wacky.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously, like, Karavek is a classic group slug, right? When an opponent casts a spell, Karavek will deal damage equal to its mana value to any target. So you can shoot face or creatures.
So dope. Out of curiosity, there's not another partner card in this deck, is there?
No, as far as I'm aware,
I wish
they
would have just included one of them,
like a mono black one, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Some mono black thing,
right?
That'd be super cool. Yeah.
Bummer. Anyway.
Yeah, so other real stuff in here. I already talked about Vile Smasher. Cataract Parasite is one of your other top cards in this deck as well. It's kind of like a oh crap, I'm blanking on the name. It's like a Nekusar kind of card. It's one of these that punishes your opponents for drawing cards. All you have to do is control a red permanent, which obviously you're Rakdos, you're going to have one in here, but that was pushing $15 before this deck here. Another one that is kind of sneaky high is Rampaging Radon, another card that's going to stop your opponents from gaining life, menace, and when another creature enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to that creature's controller. This obviously affects you as well as most group slug cards tend to, but if you can counterbalance those points with, like I said, a couple of the game pieces in here that give cards of yours lifelink, that's how you counterbalance these group slug kind of cards. Your opponents are not playing around the fact that they're going to be taking continual pinging damage. You've got pieces built into yours that help you gain some of that life back. I guess Ferocidon is a bad example of that because he also stops you from gaining life. But if you don't have that down in play, you can stabilize with some life gain cards. Like one of the other high reprints in here, Witch's Clinic. It's a land that you can pay 2, tap, and target commander gains lifelink until end of turn.
Gross.
Yeah, you just target Valgavoth or the Lord of Pain if you're using him as your commander instead, and just give them lifelink until the end of turn. So as they're dealing their damage, because you can still do combat damage just like normal. That's obviously what Valgavoth wants you to do. You get Valgavoth vigor with these. Vigor? You get him. Oh, you get vigor with the blast one counters. He gets bigger. Yeah, he's just primed to swing. Yeah. So the lifelink will help you keep you alive there. Surprisingly, I was kind of shocked by this one as well. One last notable, really good reprint in here is the newer Braids, Arisen Nightmare. I hadn't realized that this has climbed to about $10 now. Must have been an effect of standard rotation, I guess, that made Mono Black extremely good. I really like this Braids. This card is so awesome. It holds a special place for me. It carried me at Dominaria United pre-release. So good, dude. 1 in double black, 3/3. At your end step, you can sacrifice an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent that shared a card type with it, and each opponent who doesn't loses 2 life, and you draw a card.
Fire.
Wacky. I have seen Braids come down. You eat something of yours very crucial to everybody's plans, like a land. And this is just now going to dome everybody for 2, and you'll refill 3 cards. That then with Valgavoth, if that's the first life they've lost, will get him bigger, potentially. Oh, no, I guess that is on the off turn. Never mind. Screw that plan. But Braids is ridiculous. Braids is so freaking cool. And that's kind of what the deck is all about. Oh, there's also Lightning Greaves in here as well, which is notable because you are obviously going to have very heavy targets with some of these punishing style cards. So giving them Shroud is the best way to keep them.
That card was on the downward trend price-wise, and then they printed Nadu, and they gave Lightning Greaves a combo piece.
Surprise!
And we're back to $5 again.
I'm seeing it here at $7.
Oh, we're just looking at
even better.
Yeah.
So this is normally the part where I would say, hey, let's make this group slug strategy even more intense. But here's the thing, like I was just describing about when it comes to group slug, there is just so many different directions that you can kind of take it in. What I've decided to do for this upgrade guide instead is just kind of give a few examples of a different like theme directions that you could work this towards if you want to focus in on what the group slug is trying to do into a specific type. So what I mean by that is obviously one of the most intense ones that you could do is playing more styles of cards that punish opponents for doing things with their lands. Lands, as we have talked about before, is obviously the most crucial backbone to any commander deck. And most decks will just stop functioning if you deny them their lands or punish them for playing or tapping their lands. So what I mean by this is adding more cards into this deck, things like Zozu the Punisher.
Take me there, come on.
Yeah, Zozu the Punisher, Mana Barbs, and Polluted Bonds. Stuff like these. Any kind of game effects that punish your opponents for playing a land, or if they tap a land, this is going to drastically reduce how much they can play during a turn. But the counterpoint to that, though, is that you will be receiving tons of hate back at you, because I guess it's not unfair to say that doing this kind of gameplay is like soft land destruction.
Yeah, you're making people consider whether or not they want to play lands, and that is inherently taking away some agency in the game because you need lands to cast spells, obviously. But as soon as you play something like Zozu, you have a target on your head. I can tell you that as somebody who plays him pretty frequently.
We've said this a bunch so far during this segment specifically, but like I said, this is going to be a very, very tricky deck to play and not feel like you're going to be getting hated out, because this type of archetype is very tough to play. Because casuals will definitely see stuff like this as unfun or unfair. This might not be a great deck to pick up if you are learning to play or your pod is still very, very casual, but you can make this be incredibly taxing against your opponents and could pull off some fast wins with decks like these. So another direction to go into this, we brought up about Nekusar before, card draw punish. Right, you're obviously not in blue, but you can still get the Rakdos colored cards. This deck naturally has in it enchantments like Spiteful Visions that already does this naturally as well. But you can add other pieces in here, like the new from Duskmourn, Razorkin Needlehead, or Ob Nixilis the Hate Twisted. These kinds of ones that punish your opponents for drawing cards. Just depending on what they're playing, this can be a huge detriment, right? You up against somebody who's doing Rhystic Study, now they're going to be second guessing if they want to draw a card for casting spells or not, you know?
Let's go. I'm here for punishing the Rhystic players.
Yeah, or even just in general, you know, you stack enough of these down, they just go to their turn and take 5. Like, how do you stop that, you know? It's very hard, but also a very cool direction to go into. Punishing your opponents for casting spells. If you have somebody, if your meta is all about people who are trying to do multiple spells during a turn or off turn or whatever, add the game pieces that punish them for doing those kinds of effects. That's going to be stuff like Rug of Smothering or Isolation Cell, the things that are going to drain them for life equal to the amount of times that they have cast a spell during their turn.
That will probably get you the most hate, I will say.
Just from casting
those
spells.
Get a little crazy. Of like, okay, well, I guess do I want to ramp and play a spell? Because then I'll take a total of 3 this turn. Like, that just starts to get crazy.
Exactly.
I like
so the last one I would recommend then is, I guess, if you're looking to just kind of upgrade this in such a sense that you want to not be super taxing against your opponents, and this direction also keeps you alive longer, play the game pieces that discourage your opponents from attacking you. Stuff like Hellish Rebuke and Revenge of Ravens. These things like kind of the Ghostly Prison style cards, but for red and black. They deal damage or just stop opponents from attacking you just in general.
Oh, yeah. Things like Ensnaring Bridge go crazy in this kind of deck.
Crawl Space as well. Same thing, you know?
Not necessarily recommending to add those to the deck because, again, they're a bit more expensive and it kind of goes above our idea of what an upgrade for a precon guide should be. But
right, but this is
want to like.
But if I may, this is the reason why I decided to do this upgrade list as here's general strategies to work towards, because looking for upgrades, group slug cards like these are not cheap, unfortunately.
Yeah, I know.
This kind of red black burn you really, really fast for taxing you on what you're doing playing the game. You can just unfortunately encounter game pieces like these that are very, very good in this type of strategy, but they're just expensive cost-wise anyway.
Shieldred the Apocalypse.
Exactly. So this is a very tricky deck to be talking about, right? Because it's like, if you really enjoy doing this kind of thing, you degenerate monster, you're going to be putting a decent amount of money into this to make it very, very good, you know?
Yeah, I love it. Well, I guess that brings us to a more important part of the upgrade guide then, which is what are you cutting from the deck?
Yeah, we can make some cuts in here. One in specific is actually one of the new cards that is in here, because I just don't think this is super practical for both against your opponent or for you. It's called Barb Flare Gremlin. 3 and a red for a 3/2 Gremlin with first strike, haste, And whenever a player taps a land for mana, if Barbed Flare Gremlin is tapped, that player adds 1 mana of any type that land produced, then the land deals 1 damage to that player. Like, it's cool. Yeah. It's neat that this card is trying to tempt your opponents by double mana for being able to ping them, but just 1 damage? Nah. Yep. You don't want to be ramping your opponents for 1 damage a go.
Well, what's interesting about this is it counterplays itself. Where like Mana Barbs is an unbelievable card where it's just if anybody taps a land, you take 1. Really good. Mana Flare is not that great of a card in Commander, despite what some people may say about it. It's just not good to be giving your opponents that many resources for free. So, and even me, like, again, this deck is kind of ticking a lot of my like O'Hare Axonil brain. This card is really bad with O'Hare Axonil because the land itself is dealing the damage. So like it doesn't even play well with any of your like lifelink equipments because Barbed Flare Gremlin is not doing the damage. The land that's being tapped is dealing the damage.
Correct.
Super weird.
So not great, but I'm sure someone could figure out some way to break it with the double mana, whatever.
I don't know. It's also just a 3/2.
Yeah, that's true.
Like it's kind of weak.
Yeah. Tectonic Giant is another one I would cut as well. The effect that it can do is kind of neat, but just not quite doing it. What I've decided, what I was working with some of these cuts is the punishing effects that only do life loss during your turn. Because what Valgavoth wants to be happening is damage, life loss happening during the opponent's turn. So you kind of want to modify some of the pieces that are in here that they are going to be pinging away or doing life loss against your opponent during their turn. That way you get Valgavoth Vigor. I did it again. It got Vigor. You get him.
Bioshock, my guy.
Yeah, you get him bigger and you draw cards as well. So Tectonic Giant does definitely some cool damage-based things, but only during your turn. So, goodbye. We're on this again. There's enough removal in here that you do not need Decree of Pain. Valgavoth draws you cards too, you know? Yeah. Like, this is just unnecessary in here. Like how you're also always against Temple of the False God. Please stop with Decree of Pain.
Yes.
You know?
I also think board wipes don't actually seem great in this deck. You kind of want creatures out. Like, you want to be taxing things.
And I mean, you can keep Blasphemous Act. That's in here as well. Yeah. Keep Blasphemous Act because that's very useful. But
there's also a Brash Taunter in the deck, so you definitely want Decree of Pain.
Exactly.
You definitely want Blasphemous Act.
Exactly. Speaking of lands, this is a deck that also has 38 in its lands. So I think just for the sake of being able to fit more punish cards in here, cut a land or two, maybe.
Which land do you want to cut, John? Say it. Say it. Say it with me. 3, 2, 1. Temple of the False God. What are you getting? Wait, hold on. What did you say?
Terramorphic Expanse.
Yeah, I get that.
My last card that I would cut out of this deck is a weird little like enchantment hate piece called Enchanter's Bane. It's a 1 and a red enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, target enchantment deals damage equal to its mana value to its controller unless that player sacrifices it.
I can tell you exactly why this is in here. It's to play against the other 3 precons in this set, and I completely agree with cutting it.
Yeah, like you could maybe do a neat thing where like you're constantly picking on the heavy enchantress player, like, hey, your big 6 mana thing you have over there, sacrifice it or take 6, you know? But again, like I was saying, you want game pieces that do damage to your opponents during their turn. This is triggering on your end step. So also, we just now have seen in here, we've got new black cards that can deal with enchantments. So you don't even need this in here anymore. So goodbye. Out of here it goes. And that's what I've got for this deck. It is super cool. This deck is going to be something that you are either going to, on either end of it, of either playing it or playing against it, you're either going to love this or you're going to hate it. You know, I don't think there's an in-between on this one. This is why they kind of make Rakdos decks nowadays for precons. They make them more like self-sacrifice theme and not group slug like this, because this is a very, very tough strategy to play correctly, effectively, and have fun with, or have everybody have fun with, you know? It's
Dude, you have to learn how to sandbag so much and just go like, this wrecks the game right now, but I'm gonna immediately get turned around on. So you have to like learn how to sequence your plays in I'm just the innocuous Rakdos player, and then all of a sudden you're like, bam, you're going taking 16 damage to the face.
Exactly, yeah. So I think this is going to be a very cool pickup for anyone who has already been a sort of established, like they enjoy playing these kinds of group pain, or if you've never played a deck like this before, absolutely this one is a great starting point, you know? You ever wanted, I mean, like I said, you get what is this here? 8 different legendary creatures out of this box, all of which are fantastic group slug commanders, you know? Vial Smasher, you just straight up get Vial Smasher in here if you want to try to do that. But also, obviously, Valgavoth himself is very, very cool. The package you're getting here, the deck that you get, it's going to be tricky. You're either going to really, really want to upgrade this one and make it something that lasts long term, or you're going to buy this thinking it's cool, hate it, and never play it again.
Yep.
Honestly.
It's got really good reprints in it.
It does. It's one of the best reprint values amongst the decks that are here, but it's just so strange that I don't think there's going to be a middle ground with this one. You're either going to love it or hate it, and that's a real tough sell. You know,
I love this type of strategy, so I'm on team. You should get it and just play it and see what happens. Anything that is like, man, there is no decks that progress the game quite like Group Slug does, where it's like, we're kind of sitting in a board stall, but I'm still winning. Like, I'm still just doing damage as I'm a clock for the table. So I really like it and encourage you to play it. Take some time with it, but don't play it once and then get rid of it. Play it like 10 times and then decide where you sit with it, because it's going to play differently every single game.
Exactly. It really depends on like the kind of decks you go up against, what kind of pod you're playing at, you know, the cards that you draw during your turn, which ones are doing what damage effects, you know. It's different every time, but be prepared for the repercussions back against your opponents for playing something like this.
100%.
But that's our big bad guys Rakdos deck.